Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Mercy Art. So today we have a very interesting topic. I'm sure some of you are really curious to get to know this. The reason why I'm saying that is because there is a previous video I did about moving from Africa to Europe, moving from Nairobi to Stockholm, specifically in Sweden. And I got so many comments, or rather suggestions. Can you tell us some of the documentations you had to submit? How long does it take? What's the procedure? So in this particular video, we're going to look into ways in which you can move to Sweden, or you can visit Sweden. First things first, in case you're visiting Sweden, let's say, for example, it's through tourism, or you're just paying a visit to a relative or a friend. In most cases, you shall be given a travel visa, and a travel visa, you actually are supposed to stay here for up to 3 months. Now, in this video today, we are mostly going to tackle how to move to Sweden, specifically more than 3 months. Let's say, for example, you want to live here. So, to be specific, when it comes to moving to Sweden for more than 3 months, there are different ways in which you can come here. Okay, great. So first things first, so there are different ways in which you can do that. The first one is when you're moving to someone. It could be a relative, it could be a spouse, it could be, name it all. You're moving to Sweden by coming to someone, okay? So it has its own requirements. Number two, you're moving to Sweden specifically to study. And I think we've seen it whereby students from different parts of the world apply to different universities, different colleges, different schools. You basically move to Sweden for the purpose of studying. Or you can actually move to Sweden to be a researcher. And I think everyone knows what researchers do. So that's also another way in which you can move to Sweden. You can also move to Sweden to start your own business. You really want, let's say, for example, you are an entrepreneur. You want to move to Sweden to establish your own venture here. So that's another way in which you can move here. It also has its own requirements as we speak. And we have the most common one also is moving to Sweden through work. And when I talk about work, there are two ways in which people, or rather the Swedish government, consider this. The first one is you're moving to work specifically for your business, as I told you earlier on, or you're moving here to be employed. So this video specifically is targeting the people who are interested to move to Sweden to work. And I'm talking about being employed, because the requirements that you are supposed to have for employment are not the requirements you're supposed to have for starting up your own business or starting up your own startup company, something like that, because they all have totally different requirements. Great. So without further ado, that was, let me say, the introduction of what we're tackling today is moving to Sweden through work, specifically to be employed. First things first, there are many things, and don't be scared when I say many. There are many requirements that you need to really make sure that you have before you even think about moving. And the reason why I say this is because you must do your research well. And this video, I think, will be very helpful. Number one, also something I forgot to mention in the intro, I'm not employed by the migrations agency in Sweden, neither do I work for it. I'm just trying to share the knowledge that I have, or rather the knowledge that I've acquired, and also having gone through the same process, I feel like it will be really of help, because during the time I was planning to do this, it was really easy, or rather, how do I say it? It was very useful for me to watch other videos of other people who are moving to Europe, different countries in Europe, US, Canada, Australia. They may have the same requirements, but then it's usually best if you get everything from the horse's mouth, like someone who's gone through the same experience like you, someone who has, let's say, for example, done research about it, the website. I know there's so much information on the internet, but then I just hope this video is going to help someone who is planning to do so. Or probably you have a relative who is planning to move to Sweden and you're looking into the information. So this is the video which is rightfully of help to you. Assuming you have the passion and the dream of coming here through work, there are different things that the Swedish government is going to consider, specifically the migrations agency. First thing, you must have an employment contract, okay? But even before that, some time back, the Swedish government, or rather the migrations agency, used to allow people to apply for the, the work permits to come to Sweden, even with a job offer only. But things changed because there are some new rules that were imposed. That was as of 2022, I think around July, I'm not so sure, June, July or something, in which it requires each and every individual to have an employment contract. The reason why I'm giving you this is because I think I forgot to mention you must have a work permit, you must have a residency permit, and now the requirements I'm going to tell you are the things they will consider so that you're given a work permit to come here, a residency permit to come to Sweden. And just so you know, when it comes to a work permit and a residency permit in Sweden, it's basically one card. They're not separate documents that you are looking into, no. Whenever I say a work permit, is the same thing. It's like a card you're given. This card is going to work as your residency permit, and the same card is going to work as your work permit. And the only separate document that you'll have once you're here is the Swedish National Identity Card. But we are looking into, now you are back in your country. I'll give Kenya as an example because I'm from Kenya. And in case you are from another country, chances are you will still have the same requirements. There's no bigger difference, just depends with your embassy or your situation, for example. So I'm talking to people who are qualified, in terms of highly skilled. Maybe you have your degree, you have your papers from the college, and you really want to come here. Let me not repeat myself so many times, but the first thing that you need for you to even apply for the work permit stroke residency permit. So anytime I say work permit, I basically mean the residence permit at the same time, because it's one card that allows you to live in Sweden for more than 3 months continuously, okay? So as I mentioned, first thing, you'll need an employment contract. And I'm going to give you details later on. I'm listing everything, and then I'm going to go step by step, giving details on what everything needs. Employment contract, number one. I'm just looking at the notes I jotted. And then you also need to make sure that you have your passport ready, and it has the rightful time frame, because you cannot be given a residency permit to exceed the time at which your passport is expiring. Assuming today is we are in 2023, right? And your passport is expiring next year, for example. It will be a bit tricky. You may need to apply for an extension. I think that those are other requirements based on your country, for example, because if you have a passport expiring next year, technically you cannot be given a residency permit that goes for 2 years or 3 years or more than what your passport reads. So that's something you need to make sure it's on check, like personally, my passport is expiring. I took the e-passport in Kenya, and I think I took it recently, so it's expiring the next 8 years, So that one, I think it's sorted. Number one. Number two, you have to also make sure that the employment contract that you're going to sign is indicating these major things. First of all, how much you're going to be paid. It must also indicate how much time you're supposed to work. It must also clearly state the kind of employer you have and the address, all the details that need to be there, because there are laws here in Sweden about working, There is a particular amount of money that you're supposed to be paid, and that is the normal rate, In case it's lower than that, there is a problem. Chances are you may not be granted a work permit, because it's just one of the ways in which the government ensures that everyone is fairly paid, depending with the work, how do we put it? Like the laws for the work, the labor work rules, Okay, now, I'll be going back and forth because there's just too much information about this topic. I may not really consistently follow everything, but in case I forget something, I'll keep on reminding you. So just bear with me. So the first thing, when it comes to employment contract, I'm sure you're wondering, okay, so where do I get the employment contract? The first thing you have to do, which before you even get the employment contract, you must have secured a job. In case you're in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, name it all, you must make sure that you've applied probably through LinkedIn, depending with your profession. If you're in IT, in education, if you're in nursing, name it all, the field that you want to choose. You have established that you already have a job, you've done the interviews. So everything has been set, you already have an employer and they are ready to give you a job offer. And it's not just about the job offer telling you they're giving you the job. You must be given an employment contract which you're going to sign. Number one, they must sign the employment contract as well. So that's the first thing that you need to do. Something else about the employment contract, there is a specific rule in Sweden that, the job that you've been given must have been advertised way before you've been given. And they're talking about a period of at least 10 days. In the sense that if, for example, you are given a job as an IT manager in Sweden, for example, this particular job, your employer must have advertised for this job in the EU, must have advertised it in Switzerland for at least 10 days before you sign the contract. That means in case you sign the contract, let's say the job was not advertised at all, then they are actually going against the rules, the work labor rules in Sweden. So that's something you have to really make sure that your employer tells you that, the job was advertised for this couple of days and we are signing, just to make sure that you're doing everything right. Because Sweden, let me say, it's a straightforward country. They follow everything by the books, including the slightest small rule that you may kind of disregard or think it's an oversight or say, oh, that's too trivial. Sweden follows everything from point A to point Z, So that's number one. I don't know if it's number one, but then that's one of the things in the employment contract that you must ensure you have. And when it comes to signing, nowadays we live in a digital world. They can always send you an e-contract, which you're going to e-sign it and send it back. They sign it back, and then that will be ready for the application within the migration agency. Okay, so we are on stage 2. Stage 2, now that you have your employment contract, first things first, because you are in your country away from Sweden, assuming you are in Kenya, Tanzania, Nigeria, South Africa. I keep on giving examples of Africa because, well, I'm an African. Or whichever country you're coming from, it could be outside Europe, maybe you're in Australia, US, Canada, same scenario. Great. So depending on the country that you come from, this migration agency here in Sweden, Advocate, or rather, they really, really recommend that it's your employer to initiate the application process. The application of your residence permit and your work permit must be initiated by your employer. I think this makes it easier. So this is the kind of example I'm going to give. I don't have the full procedure of how someone is supposed to do the application by themselves. However, I do have the procedure when your employer is applying it for you. So now that you have signed the employment contract, your employer must have all the documentation, specifically sharing the information with the migration agency. Okay, I have this employee who is coming to work here from this date, They have a copy of your passport. They have all the details about you, the date of birth, everything, your identification, and, name it all. So basically, it's your employer that's supposed to initiate this. And before they even initiate the application procedure, there is something called the power of the attorney. Basically, you who is supposed to be working in Sweden, you are supposed to sign the power of the attorney. What do I mean by this? Basically, you're giving consent to the employer or an administrator of that organization to actually send an application on your behalf. Remember, you're not in Sweden anymore. You're not here yet. You are in your country, assuming you're back in Tanzania or Mali or South Africa. Basically, you're going to sign. It could be a letter. You're giving details to so-and-so. They are going to make this application on my behalf. You must sign it. And also the person who is going to apply it for you, it could be the employer or the administrator to that organization is going to send the application for you. They must sign it. So basically, the migration agency takes this very seriously, because in case you don't give the power of the attorney, that means you have not given the permission to your employer or the people involved to send the application on your behalf. And remember, you're not in Sweden. They are supposed to do it on your behalf because they are already here. And once you sign the power of the attorney, that means you're giving it a go-ahead to your employer to send the application to the migrations bucket. So that's the step 2. Step 3, and back to step 2, remember the first email address that you're going to give to your employer, make sure it's very active, make sure it's your personal email address, and it's the same email address that migration agency is going to contact you throughout the procedure. So just in case you lose it, then there's a problem. Now, the moment your employer has initiated the application, your employer also has her own requirements, his or her own requirements that are required on her or his side as they're sending in your application, So those, I think, are some other issues we're going to deal with. Today was specifically you, the person who is moving to Sweden. Great. So once you do that, you're going to be given some particular months or rather weeks to wait for the decision. And in most cases, you'll hear me talking about decision because here in Sweden, they use the word decision a lot. Basically, it means feedback of what you have applied for, So instead of saying feedback, I'll be using the word decision because that's the specific terminology they use here in Sweden. So once the employer has sent in the application, both of you are going to wait for the decision. And since you're given the power of the attorney, in the power of the attorney, that means the migration agency has the liberty and is allowed to also send the same decision to your employer. So just so you know, whenever you sign the power of the attorney, you are allowing these people to use your documentation to do everything on your behalf as you're waiting in your country before you come here. Okay, so you are going to receive an email after a couple of days, of course, depending with your case, depending with I'll use the word case because different cases may take a bit longer. We have people who are coming or rather moving to Sweden with the family. Maybe you have a big family and they have to review all these procedures because there are more requirements that you might need. For example, maintenance requirements. How are you is this job going to be sufficient for you, and are you going to manage to actually accommodate your family as you're here? How much will you be paid? The passports for your family. It's a bit technical, and how old are they? Those kind of things. But then if you're just moving in here as a single person, just coming you alone, I think it may be faster. I'm not so sure. We're going to look into how long it takes, I think much later on, for the decision to be made. Personally, the decision between the time the application was sent and the time I got the decision, or rather the email, the feedback email to tell me, now you need to go to your embassy, it was around 2 months or so. Yeah, 2 months. There are people, it's been a bit faster, from 4 weeks to even 3 months. There's some who have waited even 8 months, depending with your case. To be honest, I cannot say there's a specific day, or rather, specific number of days or number of months you're supposed to wait. So now that you have received an email, the question is, what is this email about? So the email that comes in is the decision. In most cases, they require you to actually go and submit, or rather show your passport to the embassy, show your identification to the embassy or your consulate. And I say consulate just in case that's what, your country is calling it, like in Kenya, we have the Swedish embassy, Yeah, so now basically, once the email comes in, you will go with your passport. Make sure you have, as I told you earlier on, your passport, which is not nearly expiring, let's say the next 1 month or so, because they will just reject it on the spot. So you're going to show your passport, at the same time give the biometrics, take the fingerprints, the photograph. But just in case they had taken it recently, probably had come to Sweden through visit, maybe just 1 month ago, 2 weeks ago, 1 year ago, chances are they already have a documentation. So you may not really need to pay the embassy a visit. So specifically, this is the time you are supposed to show up at the embassy. And that does not mean that your work permit or your residence permit is ready. No, that's just like a step ahead. So now in the embassy, basically there are several things they're also looking into. You may not be told, but it's almost like a mini interview, because in most cases they will ask you, what are you planning to do in Sweden? The normal questions. I think most of us have applied for the visas. It's almost the same thing when you go to the VFS. They will ask you the same thing. Why are you visiting this country? Why do you want to go there? When are you coming back? What are your plans? General questions. On a face value, they may really appear to be general, but in most cases, they are just looking into your case. Are you the genuine person who has applied for it? And they're just gauging, do we give you this permit or not? Because sometimes you may have the employment contract, you may have all the papers ready, but then just based on the answers you give, if they're not matching up, then there's a problem, because remember, we are talking about border security here. We have heard of so many different cases. People have been rejected just because of one crazy answer or just ignorance. So these are things you really need to pay attention to. So something else about visiting the embassy or the consulate is that for those people who are planning to travel or rather move to Sweden with the family, the same time you're applying for your residency permit or the work permit is the same time you're applying for your family as well. So don't think that you will process yours and then your family later. No, that's a big mistake. Even if you have children, and when I talk about children, they will be looking at the passports also of your children who are above age 5. So any kid who is below 5 years old, you don't need to worry, those are babies. So any kid, even if it's 5.5 years older or 6 years old, they must also be taken to the embassy together with their passports. So they'll be coming under you, under, let's say, 18-year-olds. However, they must have their passports verified or checked at the embassy or the consulate. So I've seen that being some of the things that kind of can make a delay in terms of the decision, because someone wanted to travel with the family, not all the kids have the passports. The reason why I'm saying this is knowledge is power. Putting that aside, the moment the biometrics have been taken at the embassy and the consulate, remember there is also another waiting period. Getting the decision now whether you're getting your residency permit or stroke work permit or not. And these also take some time. Sometimes when you do the applications, let's say during summertime, like for me last year, just before I came to Sweden, it was around the same time I was applying. It was, I can't remember the exact month. I think I'll go back to my documentation. But then I remember whenever I used to call my employer and calling the migration agency, they used to tell me, okay, we are being overwhelmed, because during the time there was lots and lots of applications from Ukraine, and it was around the month that is heading towards summertime, and the staff was very overwhelmed. You find that most people, this is the time they will take the leave, so we don't have all the staff members up to capacity. I don't know, but that is one of the reasons I was given that time. And they were having so many applications. So depending on the time frame that you're applying, it may kind of prolong or shorten the waiting time for the decision. And by decision, as I told you earlier on, I mean the feedback. So we are waiting for the decision now. The next step, once the decision has been made, you're basically going to be called at the embassy again to pick the residency stroke work permit. And once you have this, I can assure you, you're almost crossing that line. Great. The decision in most cases is sent through your email, and a copy is also sent to your employer. And that's the reason why in the beginning of the video, I was insisting having an active email address, because you can imagine you give an email address that is not even active, you never check, maybe it was, just a by the way. How do you think the migration agency will contact you? So this is something that you really, really have to pay attention to. So once the decision is done, as I told you earlier on, you will be called back at the embassy. You go collect your residency permit, stroke work permit. And this particular residency stroke work permit is also working as your travel visa. So don't think that you're going to pay something extra for the travel visa, because I remember during the time I used to apply for the Schengen visa, the times I used to travel back and forth in Europe, that time it was going for around $100 US, and you see, once you have your residency permit, stroke work permit, you don't need to pay for travel visa, because the residency stroke work permit is already allowing you to pass through the border control area. So no one should tell you that you need to pay for anything. I know sometimes in Africa we come from countries whereby we believe you have to pay for almost everything, for you to get your way around. Here you're not paying for anything. And now when it comes to the migration, depending with the kind of arrangement you have with your employer, there are employers who are going to pay for your migration residency permit stroke work permit. Personally, I got a very good employer who paid for everything. But now, depending on the employer, there's some employers who are going to cater for everything. There are some who will tell you they're going to pay for it, and then when you come, it will be deducted from your salary. Or two, we have a case in which your employer might tell you you have to pay this and this and that, and then they're going to give you specific bank details in which you're supposed to pay this money. And in case you're applying by yourself, there is also a certain procedure, or rather way in which you're supposed to pay for the migration. That is the fee, the processing fee to the migration agency in Sweden. I don't know about that. Personally, they paid for everything. I didn't even know how much it is. I think it was even deducted in my salary. I just don't know how much it was. So in short, what I'm trying to say is no one is going to tell you to pay for the travel visa, because the travel visa is around $100 for the Schengen if you're traveling within the Schengen countries. And Sweden is one of, the Schengen countries. Back then when I was traveling to Finland, I had to pay. That time, I think the exchange rate was so good because I paid 10,200 Kenya shillings for the travel visa. And that was, within 3 months. So here we are talking about full relocation. Yeah, I'm going to find the details about that. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the things you need to consider when you're traveling to Sweden through work. In case you have any question or questions concerning this particular video, specifically maybe the time frame or anything maybe I was not very clear about, just type in on the comment section. I will get back to you on the next video, because I'm planning to do a sequel. It's like different videos that are going to be very informative in terms of those people who are seeking knowledge. They're doing research specifically in terms of relocation to Europe, to be precise, and Sweden, to be precise again. So yeah, I'm really glad to do this, because I'm speaking from experience, number one. Number two, I noticed I've been doing lots and lots of videos about how Sweden is, the beauty about it, metro, food, different landscapes, the seasons, winter. But then I noticed we also have so many questions, because within those particular videos, I get so many. I think I counted yesterday. There were around 22 questions, people asking, how do I move to Sweden through study? How do I move to Sweden through work? How can I do this? How can I do that? So I thought, okay, let me just try one more time. I'm used to doing lots and lots of videos, being out and about, doing my business and catching different snippets of Sweden and Stockholm. But I realized I think it would be helpful if I just sit down, I point out a few things that I wish someone could have told me during the time I was going through this process, because sometimes it can be really, really overwhelming. And as I told you earlier on, try and do your research. Oh yeah, just before I forget, something else you need to know. On the next video, I'm going to have a continuation of the same thing, but now this time round, trying to point out, now that you've gotten the residency / work permit, what next? So stay tuned, and I'll appreciate your feedback. Thank you guys. Cheers.